Hello and welcome to Charles Kelly Money Tips. Hope you're all doing well today. Today I want to start with the pound, which has fallen again on speculation that there might be a general election earlier than we thought. The pound continues to fall in the currency markets against the dollar and the euro, although the headline says pound sinks, but in actual fact it's only fallen a couple of cents against the dollar and a little bit below 110 on the euro. So it was already around about that figure anyway, so it's not like it's the end of the world, but it's just a sentiment that the market doesn't like the fact that there might be an early general election, possibly in next month. Boris Johnson, who last week said he would suspend Parliament, and that caused a problem with the pound because he said he was going to suspend Parliament and there will be a long period of where the Parliament wouldn't sit. And this proroguing or suspension would mean an extra 3 or 4 days of without business. And many people see that as a way of forcing through a no-deal Brexit. However, he said that he wants Britain to leave with a deal, but will leave without a deal if necessary. And despite this, his MPs are threatening to revolt and vote against the government and possibly bring down the government, some of them. So we'll have to see what happens there. Over the weekend, you may have seen that all of the government whips, the whips are the people that keep control of the MPs and make sure that they vote with the government. And these government whips were summoned to the country residence of the Prime Ministers, which is Chequers, of course. And they were told to say to MPs, look, if you vote against the government, you will be deselected at the next general election. Now, the next general election usually sounds like years away because it could be years away, but actually it could be just weeks away. So this is all fueling uncertainty in the market. So the markets are not very happy about it. Business is not very happy that Brexit is taking so long, and that's caused a lot of uncertainty, of course. So business doesn't really quite know what it's doing. Brexit is scheduled to happen on the 31st of October. And I think it needs to be sorted out one way or the other. I think most people would agree they just want to get it out of the way. It's been going on since 2016. Most people are just sick of the word, they're just fed up with it. So let's see what's happened. If he calls a general election in 2019, it would be the third general election in the last 4 years. Remember, we had the 2015. Then Theresa May went walking in the hills and said, I want to call a general election. She had a majority, of course, I think in the 20s. She wanted to increase her majority and then, of course, lost it. And now the government is propped up by the DUP. And if you count, there was a fourth election, of course, if you count the referendum, which where people were asked do they want to stay in the EU, and they voted by a majority, I think of a couple of million, to stay out of the EU, to get out of the EU. At that time, there was no mention of a deal or anything else like that. It was just in or out. And since then, we've heard about this deal and that deal, and the Canada Plus deal, the agreement that Theresa May made with the EU, which was voted down 3 times by Parliament. So all these people who say they don't want to leave with a deal, they've actually voted against the deal that was put forward to them by Theresa May. Okay, it wasn't a great deal, but it was a deal, and Europe has said that they won't change that deal. So since Boris Johnson announced this proroguing of Parliament, there's been demonstrations in many cities across the UK. There's been a petition signed by hundreds of thousands of people. And yet, out of all of this, Boris Johnson's popularity has actually gone up. People thinking, well, good on him. He's getting on with it. He's doing something. He's not dithering around for 3 years. He's actually, taking some positive action. So we'll have to see what happens. He may have a master plan to push this through. His general election strategy might be to, there's talk that if he called a general election, it would stop his detractors from blocking Brexit, depending on the timing of the general election. So who knows? He might have a master plan up his sleeve. So we shall see what happens. But in money terms, it's obviously not great for business, but we just have to get on with our business. Now, finally, the Sunday Mail reported yesterday that Labour's, this is the main opposition party, Labour Party, their shadow chancellor, John McDonald, plans to end what he calls the buy-to-let market or the buy-to-let boom now wait for this, by offering private tenants the right to buy their rented properties at a discount. I'm just going to repeat that. A right to buy it actually means that you can buy your council property. This is where the term came from, the right to buy, brought in by Margaret Thatcher, which Labour opposed at that time, and Labour councils tried to block it. They bitterly opposed the right to buy strategy, which gave people the chance to buy their council properties. Now, my own family benefited from this, and it gave people that had traditionally rented all their lives the chance to buy their council properties at a discount. Now, I think it was a success. The flaw in the plan was that they didn't continue to build council houses, which they do need to build now to make up for people that don't want to buy or cannot buy. But the right to buy enabled millions of people to get on the property ladder for the first time. It created wealth. It cleaned up some of the old estates that were pretty rough estates. And, critics would argue that it pushed people out of their homes, and now there's less homes to rent through the council. But that's not the fault of the right to buy. That's the fault of successive governments who haven't built enough council properties. Anyway, he plans to give that same right to buy right to private tenants and let them buy their property at a discount. So you could be a landlord who rents your property to a private tenant, and John McDonald, who is really a communist rather than a socialist, could come in and say, right, we will give your tenant the right to buy your property that you've worked hard to buy and you've saved for, and now you've rented out. We're going to give your tenant the right to buy that property at a discount. Now, it doesn't make clear who's paying for this discount, but I bet it's going to be, the landlord. And I don't know, it's just a crazy plan. It's just like saying, China or Russia saying, look, we're going to take back your property. We're just going to grab your property. He also plans to tell companies that they must give up billions of pounds worth of shares to their workers. So this is like a communist plan that is far beyond the normal sort of moderate Labour voters and the moderate Labour MPs who have actually, some of whom have left the Labour Party. This goes beyond the Gordon Brown and Tony Blair type of Labour Party. This is far left Marxism. These guys support countries like Venezuela and admire countries like Venezuela who have gone bust by following these extreme socialist and sometimes communist parties. So I think if these MPs are not careful, they will get what they wish for, and they will bring down the government, and they'll end up with Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonald, who, now this is not a political podcast by any means, but if Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonald get in, then business in this country will go down the tubes, and maybe it's time to sort of sell up and get out and run for the hills, but we shall see. I think it would be a disastrous policy to start hitting private landlords, because if they pull out of the market, we'll be back to where we were in the 1960s, where nobody wanted to lend to rent out properties, and you couldn't borrow to rent out properties because tenants had the automatic right to stay forever and at controlled rent. So it just destroyed the private rental market. Now we need the private rented market because without it there'll be a lot of homeless people, and again we do need to build more social housing, but the private tenants cannot make up for the lack of years of not building social housing. The private landlords cannot make up for that. The government needs to build more council houses. I've said it when I was a councillor as well, and I don't know why they're not doing it. So thanks very much for tuning in on that. I just want to go through quickly the word of the day. Yesterday we talked about the markets, and I wanted to hi to everyone on Facebook Live. Hi to Ronald, Cecile there. Hi. Thanks for tuning in. Now, yesterday we talked about the markets and what the markets mean. It can mean the stock market, the bond market, and I mentioned commodities. So I thought I would go into what the commodity markets are. Now, commodity market trades in primary economic sector in commodities such as cocoa, fruit and sugar. There are also hard commodities which are mined, such as gold and oil and other metals. Investors can access major commodity markets around the world. Now you can read about this on my blog in more detail, but there are also things like futures contracts, commodity market contracts, spot pricing, forward in futures. Now these are what, say, farmers would use to protect their prices when they've got to look ahead and see what they can sell for. But that's what the commodity market is. It's quite big in London and America, and billions of dollars are traded on these markets. So it's quite important for the city and for Wall Street. And so that's the word of the day, the commodities market. It might be a bit of a mystery. I don't suggest you go and invest in commodities or buy futures and options, because they're quite a high risk investment. But many people do trade on this, and banks make money trading on these markets. But they are a high risk strategy. I would suggest if you want to learn to invest, learn how to invest properly in the markets, but don't just jump in and gamble. Okay, so that's all for now. Thanks for tuning in. This is Charles Kelly bringing you money tips to help you save, earn, invest, accumulate and enjoy more money. Thanks again to all the Facebook listeners, Connor there and many others there. Thanks for tuning in, Joel, Mammy, Ronald and Sivgio. I can't read that, Valentine. Thanks very much for tuning in, and I will speak to you again soon.